Hey guys, it's Diana. Welcome back to my channel. Today is January 27th, 2021, and 6 years ago I met Fawn. So this is going to be a video about me talking to you about my guide dog journey. So Fawn is actually retired. She's going to be 8 at the end of April this year. Typically I would probably be getting her ready for retirement at this time. However, she retired early, as you may or may not have figured out by now, because she had some distractions when she was working, but I'm gonna get into that a little later. So I got Fawn from Guide Dog Foundation. They are a nonprofit organization located on Long Island in New York, and they also have a sister organization called America's Vet Dogs, which places service dogs with veterans and first responders. I believe that they also may do some cross training in certain situations, like a guide dog who can also assist with PTSD. I know that they do mobility dogs, like as well as guide dogs, like cross training for that, like for a person in a wheelchair who may need a guide dog, or a person who also uses a support cane and may need a guide dog. My guide dog, my retired guide dog, is just that. She was trained to be a guide dog. Like I said, Guide Dog Foundation and America's Vet Dogs, they are the same place. They've been around since the 70s, and I personally went with them because they had a shorter training schedule, and they still do. Their training is 2 weeks, which is the same as Guide Dogs for the Blind, but they are located out on the West Coast. I wanted to go with JDF because they were closer to me. You guys know I'm from Massachusetts. I lived in Massachusetts my whole life, except, recently moved to Virginia. I personally liked the training time, as well as like their values and everything, in my research on all the guide dog schools. So Guide Dog Foundation had actually just started doing positive reinforcement food reward training. I think that they had been doing the whole positive reinforcement thing, but they had just started the whole food reward training thing, I think like the class before mine, and I went in 2015. So basically what that meant is, like, when we were in training, if the dog stopped at a curb or did stairs or whatever, we would give them a little piece of kibble to reward them for positive reinforcement. And obviously, there were tugs on the leash and forms of corrections if they were distracted. If you want to learn more about the training techniques and Guide Dog Foundation in general, I will leave the link to their website down in the description. I'm not a dog trainer. This is just going to be me talking about my experience with Guide Dog Foundation, getting my dog, and retirement. I feel like that a lot of people, when they talk about guide dogs, they may talk about like the whole process of getting them, but they don't really discuss the process of retirement and maybe the why of retirement. And like, this is only just my story. I know there are other blind and low vision YouTubers out there who have guide dogs, who have retired guide dogs, who've probably talked about this, but like, this is my experience with this particular guide dog school, and here we go. So I had gone through the application process. I started it at the beginning of September in 2014. A field rep trainer had come out to my university to do an in-person interview and what's called a Juno walk with me. Basically what that is they had a guide dog harness, and they would hold on to one end of the harness, like as the dog, and I would hold on to the other end, the handle, as the handler, just to get like a gauge for my pace and pull and issuing corrections with the harness and things like that. I also had to fill out an application, obviously, talking about my life, the amount of time that I was active outside, per day, per week, whatever, the routes that I did independently, my home life, whether or not I had cats or dogs in the house, as pets, who I lived with. At the time, obviously, I lived on campus at my university, but I did go home. I lived actually close enough away from home where I could go for the afternoon or overnight and come back to campus. I lived about like a little under an hour away from my college university. So basically they need to know about like your entire home situation, obviously, or your current living situation, in order to be able to best match the dog with you. I was in my last semester of university at the time, I was in my last year rather. By the time I got Fawn, I was in my last semester, but I was in my last year of university. I didn't know what the future was going to hold for me in terms of working and whatever, doing things after that, but I had done things obviously outside of college. I took public transportation independently. I traveled independently. Granted, I can't drive, obviously. Where I lived and where I live now, it was not close to public transit, so I would have to have somebody drive me to the train station or the bus stop, but I could still take transit independently, and I had good cane skills, which was huge. In order for somebody to get a guide dog, you need to have good cane skills and you need to be able to travel independently, obviously. Otherwise, you may have some trouble. So I had had mobility lessons basically since elementary school, orientation and mobility. I had been using my cane since I was in 3rd grade. You know, I was in my last year of college. I knew what I was doing. I had done tons of independent travel in the subway system in Boston and on the trains and buses and whatever in the area. I traveled around the university and in the neighborhood because the university was in a residential area. So I was good in terms of traveling, independence, cane skills. At the time, we had 2 cats still in the house, so I told them that, you know, we needed a dog that would be good with cats. And I also told the rep that I didn't want a golden retriever necessarily because when I was 6, I had been knocked down by a very excited golden retriever. Like, granted, the dog was nice, I was fine, but it was still traumatizing for me at the age of like 5 or 6. And I would have, in theory, been fine with a golden, but they had just put down basically on the application that it was probably best not to match me with a golden. And now I could definitely go with a golden retriever. I didn't know really anything about guide dogs other than that, you know, they were very smart. They were very calm, had good temperament, and things like that. Like, this was me going into this not really knowing much. Personally, granted, I knew a lot because I had a lot of friends at the time who had guide dogs from other guide dog schools, but nobody really, I think like 1 person actually, or 2 people who had gotten dogs from this particular school. So anyway, I started the application process the beginning of September. The field rep came out, I think that first week, did the whole interview thing. Throughout the application process, I also had to submit my eye report, which meant that I had to go to my eye doctor, obviously, have them fill out the form, you know, get like the evaluation done to send in with my application and prove that I have enough of a visual impairment basically to get a guide dog. So I am what's basically pretty much considered high partial, meaning that I can see fairly well in terms of like the broader scheme of things, but I only have vision in 1 eye. From what I remember being on class, there were actually some people who had better vision than I did, but I have heard stories of some other guide dog schools not accepting applicants with low vision because they quote unquote didn't have low enough vision, or basically like could see too well. And I personally don't think that that's fair. I know 3 people, 3 friends of mine who were denied from a particular school for the same reason, basically that they didn't consider them to have like bad enough vision to need a guide dog, so they obviously went elsewhere, and it's very discouraging, and I really wish that that would not happen. Also, I had to have my mobility instructor at the time, who I had in college, fill out an O&M form, I believe, or something similar to that, basically, you know, stating that I could travel independently and things like that. And I needed 2 references. I think it was 2. Obviously, the people at Guide Dog Foundation made calls to these references to talk to them about me, make sure that, you know, I was on the up and up and able to take care of a dog and a responsible person. So it's a big, like, whole long application process. I like to think that the turnaround for my application went fairly quickly compared to some of the other stories that I've heard. Like I said, I applied beginning of September. I think I sent everything in sometime like mid-September maybe or something. I don't know. The trainer came out, did the interview, application had been sent in, yada yada. I was accepted. I think actually no, I was accepted like at the end of September. Everything was sent in at the beginning, accepted at the end. And then the week of Thanksgiving, I specifically remember I was in class. We had like a short break like in the middle of class, and I got a call from Guide Dog Foundation telling me that they had a match for me, asking if I could go to class in January because they had a class in January coming up. And I said yes. That was fairly quick. That was also my experience. I know people who've had to wait longer, especially now, but pre-COVID I know people who've had to wait quite a few months for a match. But a lot of different factors go into these things. Like, I have a friend who needed a dog who could do city work, but one that was also like long because he's a tall person and took longer steps, so he needed a dog that could be able to keep up with him, various things like that. So I feel like that the acceptance thing really isn't the issue. It's just like waiting for a match, and all these different factors go into play, like geographical location, what, you know, your daily routine is like, whether or not you're working or in school or in college, if you have other pets at home, if you live in the city or the suburbs. The trainer who actually came to interview me was training a dog for a client who lived in Alaska, which I thought was really interesting. He said that the dog, because he had the dog like in his home training the dog really loved to curl up in front of the wood stove that they had. So the dog, I'm assuming, is doing very well in Alaska right now. As far as I'm aware, they were matched. Once I was accepted, we were all sent a packet of materials to prepare us for class. This included, I think, pre-recorded lectures maybe, or information on the lectures that we were going to have every night, as well as like a list of what to bring, some general things like to expect. I think we had to also fill out information about like dietary restrictions if we had any or something. I do remember that we got a schedule, I think, or like a vague one of like just like what the day was going to entail from wake up to the end of the day, basically. So it was very informative, and this was when I learned that Guide Dog Foundation does what is called leash guiding, which I don't think any of the other guide dog schools do this. Leash guiding basically is for short distances, and the dog is trained to guide the handler just by using the leash, not necessarily the harness. So I would use it, for example, when I was in college and would go out to let her relieve herself, like outside. If I was just leaving my dorm to do that and not going to class or going anywhere after, I would just have her leash guide me outside the building to the spot where I took her to busy and then back in, and I wouldn't have to put her harness on because she knew to follow guide commands while on leash. Guide Dog Foundation did stop doing this for a while, and they have since, I believe, started doing it again. I think there was like a gap where they didn't do it because I have a friend who shortly after I got my dog, she got her first dog, and then she got another dog because she had to retire her first dog. And her second dog was trained during the gap that they weren't doing leash guiding for some reason. She was disappointed, rightfully so, because the first dog that she had did no leash guiding and her second dog didn't. But as far as I know, they still do it. I believe that the UK does this as well. I think that they said in class that they took this from a UK model. The class coordinator person who oversaw all the trainers was from England. I think that they're the only school in the US who does leash guiding. If I'm wrong, please correct me. So I was accepted, and the class was at the end of January, which meant that I would be missing 2 weeks of classes right at the beginning of the semester. So basically what had happened was I had gone back to school, moved back in, attended classes for a week, spoke to my professors obviously like ahead of time, told them, you know, that I was going to be gone from this day to this day and coming back with a service dog and blah blah blah, making sure that I could get assignments to do while I was away. And luckily, basically all of my assignments were just reading. It wasn't like actually any worksheets or homework or papers or anything to like write. It was just reading and keeping up with the reading. Obviously I had my syllabi and I took my laptop with me to New York, so I was able to get reading done. I had my iPad and everything, so I was able to like get reading done during downtime when I was in New York. Luckily for me, not so well. Okay, it's lucky and also unlucky. While I was in New York, we were under 6 feet of snow, both in New York and in Massachusetts. This was during Superstorm Juno, I think it was called, so it was like the tail, obviously, beginning of 2015, like I said. That was the winter that Boston got like over 115 inches of snow, broke the snowfall record, which meant that because there was like 6 feet of snow on the ground in New York, our guide dog class was going to be different compared to other classes because it was blizzard conditions. There was ice on the ground. It was not necessarily like safe to go out and train outside, but it also meant that I missed all my classes because of snow days. The university was closed for at least half the time that I was away. It worked out very well for me. When I came back, obviously, and I kept getting emails from professors because they had to adjust the syllabi. Honestly, that semester, like when I came back, we ended up still missing a lot of class because of weather. I remember it was like 6 weeks into the semester and we hadn't had a full week of classes because of snow days and because I think there was like a holiday in there or something. So it was crazy because obviously the syllabi and everything needed to be adjusted. We had to have midterms like pushed to a different date. Things like were extended deadlines, but I was fine because I was away. I didn't miss anything. Versus like had I gone not in the dead of winter, things might have been different. If I had waited until the summer, obviously none of this would have mattered regardless. That's just how it happened. They had a match for me. I went. It snowed. It was crazy. I got there. Actually, I was on one of the last flights out because they had to shut down all the airports because of the bad weather. So I was on the plane, got to New York, just made it. It took us like 6 hours or 3 hours or like a ridiculously long time, like longer than it should have, to get from JFK to Guide Dog Foundation, which is in Smithtown, because just the roads were so bad. And the trainer actually who picked me up was the same person who did my home interview at the university. He was coincidentally like there, like on class, and one of the trainers. He wasn't my trainer, he didn't train Fawn, he wasn't my instructor, he was just like there. It worked out, he picked me up. He was supposed to pick up another person too, but either they were already there or they were going to be there or something, I don't know. What ended up happening is, so there were like 8 of us on class, which meant that it worked out pretty well because there was more individualized time per instructor. So there was like 1 instructor and 2 students. So like me and another person there getting their dog. The other person who was supposed to be with me and my instructor was snowed in somewhere. I don't know if they were booked on a direct flight originally or what, but they were coming from Missouri, I think, and they ended up in like Michigan or something, and they were stuck there for like a day or 2 because of the bad weather, which means they didn't get to class until 2 or 3 days into class. So that worked out for me because I had a lot of time with my trainer one-on-one and with Fawn, acclimating ourselves to each other, and like me learning how to work with a guide dog versus a cane. And then it worked out well because I was able to get a little bit ahead in training, I guess, I don't know, maybe not. But when the other person came to get their dog, they were able to spend more time with the instructor and get caught up, and everybody went home with their dogs. It worked out very well. You know, they weren't penalized or anything for being late. Obviously it was bad weather. It was good because we had all that individualized time with the instructor, and it was go, go, go. Like there were no days off. Like it was like you get up at 6 or whatever, feed the dog, take the dog out, eat, and then we would do some sort of like thing in the morning. We would either go somewhere or stay on the campus. The weather was bad, so we stayed on the campus more often than not. We would have lunch back at the guide dog school, then go out for the afternoon, then come back and have dinner, and then at night there would usually be a lecture on, you know, ADA rights with your dog or like grooming. It was very informative. One of the most anticipating lectures that we had, we got to learn our dogs' weights, we got to learn their birthdays, and we learned the names of their parents. So this also would indicate whether or not any of our dogs on class were siblings. And I don't think any of them were, but my friend that I mentioned earlier who got 2 dogs from Guide Dog Foundation, her first dog, we found out like, I don't know, a year or so into her having him that he and Fawn are half siblings. I think they have one of the same parents. I can't remember if it's mother or father, but they're half siblings. And it was really cool to find that out because this was a friend of mine, and she got her dog from there, and our dogs both got along so well, only to find out that they're half siblings. The dogs obviously didn't know that they were half siblings, but it was really cool for us to have that information and to just, you know, see them play and interact with each other. There was also a lecture, which I didn't go to, for bereavement and how to transition to a successor dog. So there were 2 people in my class who were getting successor dogs. I think one of them was like getting their 5th and the other one was getting their 6th or 7th. They had gotten quite a few dogs previously. Not all from Guide Dog Foundation necessarily, but this was not their first dog. I don't think that anybody else went to that lecture, obviously. It was just those 2. I don't remember what I did that night instead of a lecture. I don't know if they had like another thing for us to do since we weren't getting successor dogs. Basically, like there was no time for anything like during the day. At night it was more relaxed. It was honestly like a really great experience. Everybody got along very well. There was no stupid drama. We were all professional because, you know, we were all adults. Like, there was even one of the students who was on class with me was like in her early 70s and she was getting a guide dog, you know, so everybody was like very kind. It was good. There were no issues. The food there was fantastic. The people who worked in that kitchen were so great. They made amazing food. If you had any dietary restrictions, obviously, like, they would adhere to that. There were like snacks and stuff that you could get all the time, and coffee and tea and water and whatever. Like, it was great. Also, the like living accommodations were really good. Obviously, previously I was coming from living in a dorm room at a university most of my time, and it was a little tiny like shoebox closet dorm room. When I was at Guide Dog Foundation, my room was like 3 times the size of that, and I had my own bathroom, which was great. I had more privacy and more space to spread out, and everybody did, and it was good. So we, you know, we didn't have to really worry about anything. We just came with our stuff and that was it. The first day we got there, we settled in, obviously, because it was a travel day. There was nothing going on. The second day was when we got our dogs. And I remember that we were originally supposed to get them in the afternoon after lunch, but we had finished whatever we were doing in the morning early enough that they decided to give us our dogs then. So they went around the room and gave us each our dog's collar and a leash. We all got different collars. So Fawn had a 3/4 martingale, which is like, you know, 3/4 of it is nylon and then 1/4 of it is chain. So if I was issuing a leash correction, it would tighten a little bit around her neck. None of this is painful for the dog. This is how they're trained. It's fine. People would sometimes freak out about that. People sometimes still do freak out about that when they see service dog handlers correcting their dogs. And some people do issue harsher corrections. I know that there was somebody on class, I think, who had to have the collar on their dog swapped out because they, as a handler, were just a little too strong and the dog needed a different collar to be able to better take corrections. I was a little afraid at first about hurting my dog because I didn't know, you know, I was just concerned. But obviously they said it's fine, it's not gonna hurt the dog, it's just like a, like, hey, snap out of it, like a tap on the shoulder. We went around, got our collars and leashes, then they each told us what our dogs' names were gonna be. Now, obviously we don't name the dogs. A lot of the dogs are sponsored by people or organizations. Mine, I don't think, was sponsored. And when they told me that my dog's name was Fawn, I was like, oh, I don't know if I like that name. I was like very iffy about it. But then I met her. So we had to each go wait in our rooms, and they would come around individually and bring us our dogs, like individually, so we could meet our dogs. It was very exciting. So they walked in, my instructor and one of the people taking like photos and stuff walked in, and they brought Fawn to me. So I had to obviously give them the collar and leash back so they would put that on her, I think, because like they had to put tags and everything as well. I was very happy that they gave me a small dog. I think I had put that in my application because like I'm short, I'm not necessarily the strongest person on earth, obviously, and I didn't want like a giant dog that was going to be pulling me around everywhere. Fawn is fairly short. She's stocky for a lab because I think she's an English lab. Both of her parents were labs, but I think that what Guide Dog Foundation does is that they do mix golden in there somewhere, so I don't think they're 100% purebred. I could be completely wrong, but I thought that I remembered somebody said that when we were on class or something. The thing is that I wasn't allowed to tell anybody anything about my dog. Like, well, I couldn't tell like the name. I think I could say that I got a female dog or I got a yellow lab or something, but like that was it. Like I couldn't tell the name of my dog until they told the puppy raisers. And this was like on social media, so like obviously, you know, I called my parents, told them, I took some pictures, sent them pictures, but like I couldn't post anything on social media until they told the puppy raisers. Puppy raiser is a person basically who takes care of and raises the dog from, you know, a very young puppy age until they're ready to go back in for formal guide work training. So they taught basic training like sit, come, stay, housebroke them, took them to vet appointments, did like area training with the puppy groups, taking them to stores and Target and whatever, because obviously as service dogs in training, they have the same right to be in a store with the dog as a service dog handler does with their dog because they're in training. So they are allowed to go into airports and on planes, just be exposed to all these things. Obviously they have to be because they're going to be a future service dog. We then started our training, which, like I said, most of it took place indoors for the first couple of days. And what was a little bit annoying was that there's like a heater in the ground in the area where we had to take our dogs out to go to the bathroom, and the heater broke, which meant that it was just a sheet of ice, meaning that the instructors had to take our dogs out for us for the first couple of days that we had them because they couldn't have us go out. It was a liability, and you know, they had to fix the heater. So once that was fixed, we obviously had to take our dogs out. They taught us how to pick up after them and everything. Eventually we moved on to going to the mall, to doing outdoor things, like a lot of, you know, crossing streets and walking and stuff like that. Obviously it was a little difficult because of the snow, but we got it done. So one of the days we ended up going to New York City. We took the train a few stops, and then we took, I think, like the van from the school or something, like to Queens. We went into Queens, we did the subway, we walked around, and I remember that Fawn got so dirty, like her stomach and her legs and everything, because she is so short and was so low to the ground, and it was like so grimy on the streets with the slush and everything that she just got like so icky. So she had to have a bath a couple of days after, you know, they gave her a bath in the grooming place at the school, which was very generous of them. It was a lot of work and it was very tiring, and obviously because of the snow and the sub-zero weather, we had to wear layers and heavy coats. I didn't come prepared in terms of like a heavy coat, which was totally on me. I had a coat, it was not the heaviest it could have been. I mean, it was fine, it wasn't the end of the world. One of the students on class though had dog allergies, like kind of bad, which was not good for them. They ended up obviously getting a poodle because Guide Dog Foundation does have poodles for people who have allergies or people who live with somebody who has allergies. But obviously because they were around all the other dogs and the dander and everything, they were not necessarily having the best time. But nobody got sick, which was great. Everybody was fine. One of the other things that we did, that I did specifically, was we went to a nearby university because I was, you know, still in college at the time and I wanted to practice going around campus with Fawn. We did some work in the library at the university. We did some work on campus, and it was very rewarding to have that individualized training, because while I was off doing that, other people were off doing other things. Like, I remember that when we were in the city, because I was one of the people who needed more city work and like subways and stuff like that, we took the subway and everything. There were other people who didn't take the subway. I think they went to a park and walked in the park or something. Now, because of COVID times, as far as I am aware, they are still placing dogs, but they are doing home training. And this was only a thing that was available under like a special circumstance and not for your first dog. I think that now, obviously, because of COVID times, it's just safer to do home training, which means that a trainer will come to the client in their home town, like their home community, with the dog, and they will do training with the dog and the client, like do the whole guide dog training there, as opposed to having everybody come to New York. Obviously, with the times that it is, it's just better. I think that personally that's a great option to have. I know people have different opinions on home training versus class training, and I loved being in class, but I do think that maybe a home training thing would also be a good experience to have. Partway through training, it's not this way now because of the way they've restructured class. I think it's the last day of training, like obviously pre-COVID, but partway through we had what was called Celebration Saturday. Now it's Celebration Sunday, or maybe I'm wrong, it's the other way around. It was one of the weekend days, and all the puppy raisers and sponsors came who were able to. I think there were a couple of people who couldn't come for some reason, and they ended up talking to the people on class like through Skype or something. I got to meet Fawn's puppy raisers, and I still keep in touch with them to this day. She was raised by 3 people. One of them for like most of her raising time on a university campus, and the other 2, I think she was like in what they call a finishing home, basically. Her first puppy raiser had gotten a job offer elsewhere and had to move and couldn't take her with her, I think. I don't really know. It was really cool to be able to meet them. I got this picture frame, which is behind me, which is in like all of my videos. You guys can probably see it. It has a bunch of photos of Fawn as a puppy, and she's wearing the yellow Future Guide Dog coat, which they've changed the design of the coat now. I think they go with something that Roughwear has or something, versus the older style like cape looking thing that she's wearing in all those photos. And it's like a bunch of pictures of her as a puppy and various things. Some of them she's wearing the coat, some of them she's not. They also gave me a Nylabone, which was was one of her favorite toys as a puppy. It's like a specific nylabone. It has like rubber in the middle of it. We got to talk, get to know each other. The Guide Dog Foundation played like a slideshow of like pictures and things that they had taken throughout the week. We got a copy of all those photos afterwards, like on a disc. It was really great to be able to meet them and still keep in touch with them now. I remember actually for Fawn's birthday, the first birthday that I had her for that year, I got a package from one of her puppy raisers with another toy for her and some treats and things like that. Actually, no, I'm wrong. I don't know if they gave me a toy for her during the celebration day. I think that I got the picture frame. The toy that I'm talking about, I got from the puppy raiser for Fawn's birthday, because they had sent me a couple more pictures and a thing of treats, like her favorite treats as a puppy, which she still loves. And I think that's when I got the toy. I could be completely misremembering both of these events, but it was really cool to be able to meet the puppy raiser and keep in touch with them, because not all the guide dog schools do that. I don't know why personally. I know that there's one of them you have to like go through the school for any sort of correspondence between you and the puppy raiser. Like you have to send it to the school and the school will send it to them and vice versa. That particular school will give their clients what's called a puppy profile, basically, and it's like as filled out as the puppy raiser wants it to be. Like some people could just write like a few sentences or whatever, and some people could just send like a bunch of pictures and stuff. It's, I don't know, this is what I've heard from people who've attended that place and have gone through all of that. Point is that I think that it's a good thing to know the puppy raiser, because then you get a chance to make a new friend if you want. Like it's optional. You don't even have to keep in touch with the puppy raiser, but like it's there. Like you can talk to them, send photos back and forth. Because of that, I was able to befriend them on Facebook and see all of these pictures of Fawn like when she was a puppy, and it was really great. And I still, you know, I have some of those photos like obviously behind me, like some of them are from that Facebook album, and I have some elsewhere. I think it's really important to have that connection, because those people like raised the dog. They were with the dog for most of that dog's life up until that point. Then they went back and were with the trainer, the dog went back to the school, was with the trainer, and then they met the handler. I don't know, everybody might not agree with me, but that's just my opinion. I think that it's really great that a lot of the schools are still enabling contact between puppy raisers and encouraging it, the puppy raiser and the handler, versus like discouraging. I think it's good for both people. And you know, if the puppy raiser doesn't want to keep in touch, that's fine, but at least we got to meet. They got to see how the dog's doing. Because that happened halfway through training, obviously we had another week of doing what I had talked about, going to various places, continuing training and things like that. Then it was time to go home. The last day obviously was dedicated to travel. I had a fairly early flight, I think. I came home with Fawn. I spent like, I think the night at home, and then I went back to college the next day or the day after or something. What was interesting was I was the first person at my university to live with a service dog on campus. There are other students who had service dogs in the past, but they weren't living there. For whatever reason, the disability services office at my school wanted me to take Fawn to a very specific place to relieve her, which meant crossing a busy service road, more often than not in the dark, a pitch dark, not well lit service road. And I was not doing that because I shouldn't have to. She is my service animal, and there was a perfectly good place for me to take her to busy right near my dorm. And I was not going to cross a busy service road and take her. That's dangerous. So I just did what I wanted, because after talking to a few people at Guide Dog Foundation, I found out that they were not allowed to do that and tell me where to relieve my dog on the campus, as far as I remember that conversation, and here we are. So basically, throughout me working with her the first while or so, first few months, I had noticed that she was starting to become distracted by other dogs, and she would bark at them. And so we had tried a gentle leader, which is like a head collar, so it would like give me a little bit more control over where her head was and what she was doing and issue better correction. And that worked for a bit, and then it didn't. The Guide Dog Foundation was really great about being supportive, sending out the trainer to do, you know, like aftercare and stuff with me and to try and curb this issue. Another thing that we were supposed to do on class 2 that we didn't because of the snow was a night walk. So we were supposed to go out and walk a route that we had already done during the day at night. Obviously we couldn't do that because we didn't walk that route during the day, and it was very dangerous at night with the bad weather. So what had happened was the trainers had to come out like immediately, basically after class was over, to our homes and communities and do a night walk there. So I did that with the trainer on my campus, which for me was a little bit redundant because I had already walked around at night with Fawn on campus. It got dark at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. My class ended at around that time, so I was already walking around campus in the dark with her. So then I graduated from university. Fawn had a little cap and gown that matched mine. It was adorable. Everybody loved it. Everybody really did love it. Like, she stole the show. And you know, then I continued to work with her all the time. Like, whenever I would go out anywhere, you know, I'd gone on job interviews with her and things like that. Unfortunately, her dog distractions got to a point where it was a safety concern, and I decided, along with the school, to retire her. Now, fortunately, because I signed a contract stating that I owned her, let me back up. So Guide Dog Foundation, not every school does this, but Guide Dog Foundation offers custody or ownership of your dog. Some schools own the dog for the first couple of years but cover vet expenses or something. Some don't even offer ownership at all. Some offer ownership right out the gate. What they did on class was they came around to each of us privately and asked us which we wanted to do, ownership or custody. You would have to sign paperwork. So I obviously wanted to own my dog. I didn't want to have custody of her. I wanted to own her. They were like, yeah, that's a great idea. So I signed the paperwork. It was fine. Because of that, when I retired her, there was a clause, I guess, that said that if she had worked for under 2 years, that there was a chance she would go back to the school and be retrained for another match. But because of the dog distractions being such an issue, and I think also because I signed ownership, I don't know, they let me keep her, which ended up very well for me because she's a great dog. She worked very well, except when she got distracted by another dog. And it wasn't every dog that we came across. It was really weird. There was like no really rhyme or reason to it. Another good thing was that she didn't get distracted by food, which is bizarre since she's a lab. Like, I literally dropped French fries in front of her once by accident in the dining hall at school, and she just looked at me like I was stupid. So I know other people who had guide dogs who had very bad food distractions. I know someone specifically whose dog dragged them down a flight of stairs because they were distracted by food, and for whatever reason, even though their food distractions for their dog were anecdotally, from what I heard, in my opinion, worse than Fawn's dog distractions at that point, they didn't retire their dog until very long after. Versus I retired Fawn before it got to the point where it would be dangerous. Retirement really sucked, I'm not gonna lie. It's a very emotional process. I obviously had to give the harness back to Guide Dog Foundation because it is their property. It says Guide Dog Foundation on the thing. I do not own the harness. Fawn is honestly a great dog, and I was very disappointed, and I still kind of am, that she's not working anymore. And I think that she was too for a while when retirement had happened, because she didn't know what was going on. She just knew she wasn't going out with me all the time, and I was taking my cane instead. I kept up with my cane skills while she was working. Because I kept up with my cane skills, I was able to transition better from working a dog back to my cane, versus some people can't do that, and that's fine, but I am very glad that I was able to keep those skills up, especially now when she hasn't been working for a long time. She only worked with me for 1.5 years before I retired her. Would I get another guide dog again? A lot of people have asked me this. Seriously, like more people than I can count, and more often than I can count. It's a little annoying, but I always told them, yeah, probably later in life, depending on my living situation. Right now, I'm not working. I'm having a lot of trouble finding employment. COVID has not made it easy. It's made it way more difficult. And I'm not going anywhere. If I were to get another guide dog, I would ideally like to live in a place where I could have easy access to public transit, which was not anywhere that I've ever lived in my life, except for the times that I lived on campus. I think that maybe later on, but also I want to see how things go in terms of COVID in guide dog schools. I know there are so many people on really long wait lists for a dog, and a lot of people have been complaining about it, and I get their frustration. However, you have to look at the times. We're almost a year into this pandemic, over a year since the first COVID case was discovered here, and like almost a year into when we actually went into full lockdown. Not really. Obviously, these services have been impacted very negatively due to the pandemic. I mean, all of the guide dog schools except for one, evidently, I don't know which one, were closed for a good part of last year, and all of these places are non-profit organizations, meaning they obviously receive zero government funding. It's all due to donations and sponsorships and things like that. Some of you who may have watched the Today Show a few years back probably know Guide Dog Foundation and America's Vet Dogs because they raised puppies for them. Like the Today Show sponsored 2 puppies, I think, and then some like local sister NBC stations, one in Boston, one in Atlanta, I think one somewhere in California, I don't know. They also sponsored puppies. I don't know about other guide dog schools. I only know that Guide Dog Foundation right now is only doing home training, and I'm assuming that their waiting list, like all the other places, is very, very long. But like I said, if you want to learn more about Guide Dog Foundation, I will leave the link to their website down in the description. I also suggest you follow them on social media, which I will leave the links down to below. You will see a lot of cute dog pictures. They're really great. And with that, I really appreciate you guys watching this and listening to my journey on getting a first guide dog and dealing with retirement and everything in between. And I will see you guys next time. Thanks.